Welcome back. I am Pemberton, and this is Book 7 Part 3. The handsome, ambitious Absalom has spent years stealing the hearts of Israel, and now he strikes proclaimed king at Hebron. He marches on Jerusalem, and David the old lion chooses flight over a bloodbath in his own city, and goes out over the Kidron weeping, barefoot, cursed by the way. We will follow the whole of it, the loyal friends and the bitter traitors, the rival councils of Ahithophel and Hushai on which the war turns, the great battle in the wood of Ephraim where the forest devours more than the sword, and Absalom caught by his head in the branches of a great oak, and killed against the king's express command by the hard, practical Joab. And then the sea. No one who reads it forgets a victorious king who will not rejoice, crying out for the worthless son who tried to kill him. Let us go on.
After Absalom had gained this success with the king, he quickly obtained for himself many horses and many chariots. He also had 50 armor-bearers attending him. Every day he came early to the king's palace and spoke in a pleasing way to those who came seeking justice and lost their cases. He suggested that their loss had happened because the king lacked good counselors around him, or perhaps because the judges had made a mistake in giving an unjust sentence. By this means he gained the goodwill of them all. He told them that if only such authority were committed to him, he would distribute justice to them in the most fair and equal manner. When he had made himself so popular among the multitude, he thought he had already secured the people's goodwill. 4 years had passed since his father had been reconciled to him. Then Absalom came to David and begged him for permission to go to Hebron and offer a sacrifice to God, because he had vowed to do so when he fled out of the country. David granted his request. Absalom went there, and great multitudes came running together to him, for he had sent word to many people telling them to do so. Among them came Ahithophel the Gilonite, one of David's counselors, and 200 men from Jerusalem itself. These men did not know Absalom's intentions, but had been summoned as though for a sacrifice. By this scheme, Absalom was appointed king by all of them. As soon as this news was brought to David, and he learned what he had not expected from his son, he was frightened by this impious and bold undertaking. He wondered that Absalom was so far from remembering how recently his offense had been forgiven that he now undertook enterprises much worse and more wicked, first, to deprive him of the kingdom God had given him, and second, to take away the life of his own father. David therefore resolved to flee to the regions beyond Jordan. He called his closest friends together and told them everything he had heard about his son's madness. He committed himself to God, asking God to judge between them concerning all their actions. He left the care of his royal palace to his 10 concubines and departed from Jerusalem. The rest of the multitude willingly accompanied him and hurried away with him, especially the 600 armed men who had been with him from the time of his first flight in the days of Saul. Abiathar and Zadok, the high priests, had decided to go away with him, as had all the Levites who were with the ark. But David persuaded them to remain behind, because he hoped that God would deliver him without the ark being moved. He ordered them to let him know privately how everything was going. Their sons, him as the son of Zadok and Jonathan the son of Abiathar, were to be faithful servants to him in all things. The Gitrate went out with David whether David would allow him or not, for David had tried to persuade him to stay behind, and for that reason I appeared even more friendly to him. As David ascended the Mount of Olives barefoot, with all his company in tears, he was told that Ahithophel was with Absalom and had taken his side. Hearing this increased his grief. He earnestly begged God to turn Absalom's mind away from Ahithophel, because he feared that Ahithophel would persuade Absalom to follow destructive counsel. Ahithophel was a prudent man and very sharp in seeing what was advantageous. When David reached the top of the mountain, he looked over the city and prayed to God with many tears, as though he had already lost his kingdom. There a faithful friend of his named Hush. I met him. David saw that Hushai's clothes were torn, that ashes were all over his head, and that he was lamenting the great change in affairs. David comforted him and urged him to stop grieving. At last he begged him to go back to Absalom, appear to be one of his party, discover the secret counsels of his mind, and oppose the counsel of Ahithophel. David told him that Hush, I could not do him as much good by being with him as he could by being with Absalom. Hush, I was persuaded by David, left him, and came to Jerusalem. Absalom himself also came there a little while afterward. When David had gone a little farther, Ziba met him. Ziba was the servant of Mephibosheth, whom David had sent to care for the possessions given to him as the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul. Ziba came with a pair of asses loaded with provisions, and asked David to take as much of them as he and his followers needed. When the king asked where he had left Mephibosheth, Ziba said he had left him in Jerusalem, expecting in the present confusion to be chosen king because of the benefits Saul had conferred on the people. At this the king was very indignant and gave Ziba everything he had formerly bestowed on Mephibosheth, deciding that it was much more fitting for Ziba to have those possessions than the other man. Ziba greatly rejoiced at this. When David was at a place called Bahurim, a kinsman of Saul named Shimei, I came out and threw stones at him, while also speaking reproachful words against him. As David's friends stood around the king and protected him, Shimei, I persisted even more in his insults. He called David a bloody man and the author of every kind of mischief. He also ordered him to leave the land as an impure and accursed wretch. Shimei, I thanked God for depriving David of his kingdom and causing him to be punished for the injuries he had done to his master Saul, and for doing this by means of David's own son. All those with David were provoked and angry at Shimei, especially Abishai, who wanted to kill him. But David restrained his anger. He said that they should not bring on themselves another fresh misfortune in addition to those they already had. He said that he truly had not the least regard or concern for this dog who raved at him. He submitted himself to God, by whose permission this man was treating him in such a wild manner. Nor was it any wonder, David said, that he was obliged to endure these abuses from Shimei, while he was experiencing the same kind of thing from an impious son of his own. Perhaps God would have some compassion on them. If it was his will, they would overcome them. So David went on his way without troubling himself with Shimei, who ran along the other side of the mountain and poured out his abusive language abundantly. When David came to Jordan, he allowed those who were with him to refresh themselves, for they were weary. When Absalom and his counselor Ahithophel came to Jerusalem with all the people, David's friend Hushai came to them. After Hushai had worshipped Absalom, he wished that his kingdom might last a long time and continue through all ages. But Absalom said to him, How is it that you, who were such an intimate friend of my father and appeared faithful to him in everything, are not with him now, but have left him and come over to me? Hushai gave a very fitting and prudent answer. He said that they ought to follow God and the multitude of the people. Since these, his lord and master, were with Absalom, it was proper for Hushai to follow them because Absalom had received the kingdom from God. He said that if Absalom believed him to be his friend, he would show the same faithfulness and kindness to him that Absalom knew he had shown to his father. There was no reason, he said, to be at all dissatisfied with the present state of affairs, because the kingdom had not been transferred to another family, but still remained in the same family, since the son had received it after his father. This speech persuaded Absalom, who had previously suspected Hushai. Absalom then called Ahithophel and consulted him about what he ought to do. Ahithophel persuaded him to go into his father's concubines. He said that by this action the people would believe that Absalom's break with his father was irreconcilable, and therefore would fight against David with great eagerness. Until then, he said, they were afraid to take up open hostility against David because they expected that father and son would be reconciled again. Absalom was persuaded by this advice and commanded his servants to pitch a tent for him on top of the royal palace, in the sight of the multitude. There he went in and lay with his father's concubines. This happened according to Nathan's prediction, when he prophesied and made known to David that his son would rise up in rebellion against him. After Absalom had done what Ahithophel advised, he asked his counsel a second time, now about the war against his father. Ahithophel asked only that Absalom let him have 10,000 chosen men. He promised that he would kill David and bring the soldiers back safely. He said that then, when David was dead, the kingdom would be secure for Absalom, but not otherwise. Absalom was pleased with this advice, and he called for Hushai, David's friend, for that is what he called him. He told Hushai Ahithophel's opinion, and then asked what his own opinion was about the matter. Hushai understood that if Ahithophel's counsel were followed, David would be in danger of being captured and killed. So he tried to introduce a contrary opinion. You know, O king, the courage of your father and of those who are now with him. He has fought many wars, and has always come away victorious. He is probably now staying in the camp, for he is very skillful in stratagems and in foreseeing the deceitful tricks of his enemies. Yet in the evening he will leave his own soldiers, and either hide himself in some valley or set an ambush at some rock. So when our army joins battle with him, his soldiers will withdraw for a little while, but then they will come upon us again, encouraged because the king is near them. Meanwhile your father will suddenly show himself during the battle, and he will put courage into his own people when they are in danger, while bringing terror upon yours. Therefore consider my advice and reason about it. If you must acknowledge that it is best, then reject Ahithophel's opinion. Send throughout the whole country of the Hebrews and order them to come and fight with your father. You yourself should take the army and be your own general in this war, and not entrust its management to another. Then expect to conquer him easily, when you overtake him openly with his few supporters, while you yourself have many tens of thousands who will be eager to show you their diligence and readiness. And if your father shuts himself up in some city and endures a siege, we will overthrow that city with engines of war, and by undermining it. When Hushai had said this, he succeeded against Ahithophel, for Absalom preferred Hushai's opinion to the others. Yet it was none other than God who made Hushai's counsel appear best to Absalom's mind. So Hushai hurried to the high priests Zadok and Abiathar, and told them Ahithophel's opinion, his own opinion, and that the decision had been made to follow his advice. He therefore told them to send to David, report it to him, inform him of the counsels that had been taken, and further urge him to cross Jordan quickly, lest his son change his mind, hurry after him, prevent his escape, and seize him before he was safe. The high priests had their sons concealed in a suitable place outside the city, so that they might carry news to David of what was taking place. Accordingly, they sent a trusted maidservant to them with the news of Absalom's counsels, and ordered them to tell David the same as quickly as possible. The young men made no excuse and did not delay. Taking their father's commands with them, as pious and faithful servants, and judging that speed and suddenness were the best proof of faithful service, they hurried to meet David. The horsemen saw them when they were 2 furlongs from the city and informed Absalom about them. He immediately sent men to seize them. When the sons of the high priests perceived this, they left the road and turned aside to a certain village called Bahurim. There they asked a certain woman to hide them and keep them safe. She let the young men down by a rope into a well and laid fleeces of wool over them. When those who were pursuing them came to her and asked whether she had seen them, she did not deny that she had seen them, for she said that they had stayed with her for some time, but she said that they had now gone their way. She added that if the pursuers followed them at once, they would catch them. But after a long pursuit they could not catch them, and they came back again. When the woman saw that those men had returned, and that there was no longer any danger that the young men would be caught by them, she drew them up with the rope and told them to continue their journey. They therefore pursued that journey with great diligence, came to David, and accurately informed him of all Absalom's counsels. So David commanded those who were with him to cross Jordan during the night, and not to delay at all. But when Ahithophel's advice was rejected, he mounted his ass and rode away to his own country, Jaelon. He called his family together, and told them clearly what advice he had given Absalom. Since Absalom had not been persuaded by it, Ahithophel said that he would plainly perish before long, and that David would overcome him and return to his kingdom again. He therefore said it was better for him to take his own life freely and with greatness of spirit than to expose himself to punishment by David, against whom he had acted wholly for Absalom. After speaking this way to them, he went into the innermost room of his house and hanged himself. Thus came the death of Ahithophel, who condemned himself. When his relatives had taken him down from the noose, they attended to his funeral. As for David, he crossed Jordan, as we have already said, and came to Mahanaim, a very fine and very strong city. All the chief men of the country received him with great pleasure, both because they were ashamed that he had been forced to flee from Jerusalem, and because of the respect they had borne him during his former prosperity. These men were Barzillai the Gileadite, Sapphira the ruler among the Ammonites, and Machir, the principal men of Gilead. They supplied David and his followers with abundant provisions, so that they lacked neither beds nor blankets, neither loaves of bread nor wine. They also brought them many cattle for slaughter, and provided all the furnishings they needed for refreshment when they were weary, for food, and for plenty of other necessities. This was the state of David and his followers. But Absalom gathered a vast army of the Hebrews to oppose his father, crossed the river Jordan with them, and encamped not far from Mahanaim in the country of Gilead. He appointed Amasa to be captain of all his army in place of Joab his kinsman. Amasa's father was Ithra, and his mother was Abigail. Abigail and Zeruiah, the mother of Joab, were David's sisters. When David counted his followers and found that there were about 4,000 of them, he resolved not to wait until Absalom attacked him. He appointed over his men captains of thousands and captains of hundreds, and divided his army into 3 parts. One part he committed to Joab, the next to Abishai, Joab's brother, and the third to Ittai, David's companion and friend, who came from the city Gath. David wanted to fight among them himself, but his friends would not allow him. Their refusal was based on very wise reasons. They said that if they were conquered while he was with them, they would lose all good hope of recovering themselves. But if one part of the army were defeated, the other parts could retire to him and prepare a larger force, while the enemy would naturally suppose that he had another army with him. David was pleased with their advice and resolved to remain at Mahanaim. As he sent his friends and commanders out to battle, he urged them to show every possible eagerness and faithfulness, and to remember the benefits they had received from him, which, though not very great, had still not been insignificant. He begged them to spare the young man Absalom, lest some harm should come to David himself if Absalom were killed. In this way he sent out his army to battle and wished them victory in it. Joab then arranged his army for battle against the enemy in the great plain, with a forest behind him. Absalom also brought his army into the field to oppose him. When the battle was joined, both sides showed great deeds with their hands and great boldness. One side exposed themselves to the greatest dangers, and used all their eagerness, so that David might recover his kingdom. The other side was not lacking either in doing or suffering, so that Absalom might not be deprived of that kingdom and brought to punishment by his father for his shameless attempt against him. Those who were more numerous were anxious not to be conquered by the few who were with Joab and the other commanders, since that would be a greater disgrace to them. David's soldiers, on the other hand, strove hard to overcome the many tens of thousands the enemy had with them. David's men were victorious, being superior in strength and skill in war. They followed the others as they fled through the forests and valleys. Some they took prisoner, and many they killed, more in the flight than in the battle, for about 20,000 fell that day. All David's men rushed violently upon Absalom, for he was easily recognized by his beauty and height. Absalom himself was also afraid that his enemies would seize him, so he mounted the king's mule and fled. But as he was carried along with violence, noise, and great motion, being himself light, his hair became greatly entangled in the large boughs of a knotty tree that spread out widely. There he hung in a surprising manner. The beast went on farther and swiftly, as if its master were still on its back, but Absalom, hanging in the air from the boughs, was caught by his enemies. When one of David's soldiers saw this, he informed Joab. The general said that if the man had shot and killed Absalom, Joab would have given him 50 shekels. The man replied that he would not have killed his master's son even if Joab had given him 1,000 shekels, especially since David had ordered, in the hearing of them all, that the young man should be spared. But Joab told him to show where he had seen Absalom hanging. Joab then shot him in the heart and killed him. Joab's armor-bearers stood around the tree, pulled down Absalom's dead body, threw it into a great hidden chasm, and laid a heap of stones over him until the hollow was filled and had both the appearance and the size of a grave. Then Joab sounded a retreat and recalled his soldiers from pursuing the enemy's army, in order to spare their countrymen. Absalom had erected for himself a marble pillar in the king's dale, 2 furlongs from Jerusalem, and he named it Absalom's hand. He said that if his children were killed, his name would remain by that pillar. He had 3 sons and 1 daughter, named Tamar, as we said before. When Tamar was married to David's grandson Rehoboam, she bore a son named Abijah, who succeeded his father in the kingdom. But we shall speak about these matters in a more proper part of our history. After Absalom's death, everyone returned to his own home. Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok the high priest, went to Joab and asked him to permit him to go and tell David of the victory, bringing him the good news that God had given him assistance and providence. Joab, however, would not grant his request. He asked him whether he, who had always been a messenger of good news, now wanted to go and tell the king that his son was dead. So Joab told him to desist. Then he called Hushai and committed the matter to him, ordering him to tell the king what he had seen. But when Ahimaaz again asked to be allowed to go as a messenger, and assured Joab that he would report only what concerned the victory, and not the death of Absalom, Joab gave him leave to go to David. Ahimaaz took a nearer road than the former messenger, one known to no one but himself, and he arrived before Hushai. David was sitting between the gates, waiting to see when someone would come from the battle and tell him how it had gone. One of the watchmen saw Ahimaaz running, and before he could tell who he was, he told David that he saw someone coming to him. David said that he was a good messenger. A little while later, the watchman informed him that another messenger was following him, and the king said that this one also was a good messenger. But when the watchman saw Ahimaaz and recognized that he was already very near, he told the king that it was the son of Zadok the high priest who came running. David was very glad and said that he was a messenger of good tidings, and was bringing him such news from the battle as he desired to hear. While the king was saying this, Ahimaaz appeared and worshipped the king. When the king asked him about the battle, Ahimaaz said that he brought him the good news of victory and dominion. When David asked what he had to say about his son, Ahimaaz said that he had come away suddenly as soon as the enemy was defeated, and that he heard a great noise from those pursuing Absalom, but could learn no more because he had hurried when Joab sent him to report the victory. Then Hushai came, worshipped David, and informed him of the victory. David asked him about his son, and Hushai replied that the same misfortune that had befallen Absalom should befall David's enemies. That word did not allow either David or his soldiers to rejoice over the victory, though it was a very great one. David went up to the highest part of the city and wept for his son. He beat his breast, tore the hair of his head, tormented himself in every way, and cried out that he wished he himself had died and ended his days with Absalom. He had a tender natural affection, and had extraordinary compassion for the son in particular. When the army and Joab heard that the king was mourning for his son, they were ashamed to enter the city as conquerors. Instead, they all came in dejected and in tears, as if they had been defeated. While the king covered himself and bitterly lamented his son, Joab went into him and comforted him. "O my lord the king, you do not realize that you are bringing disgrace on yourself by what you are now doing. You seem to hate those who love you and undergo dangers for you, and even to hate yourself and your family, while loving those who are your bitter enemies. You seem to desire the company of those who are no more, and who have been justly killed. If Absalom had won the victory and firmly established himself in the kingdom, none of us would have been left alive. All of us, beginning with you and your children, would have miserably perished. Our enemies would not have wept for us, but would have rejoiced over us and punished even those who pitied us in our misfortunes. Yet you are not ashamed to do this for one who has been your bitter enemy, who, although he was your own son, proved so wicked toward you. Therefore stop your unreasonable grief, come out, be seen by your soldiers, and thank them for the eagerness they showed in the fight. For I myself will this very day persuade the people to leave you and give the kingdom to another if you continue to act this way. Then I shall make you grieve bitterly and in earnest." When Joab spoke this way to him, he made the king stop his sorrow, and brought him back to consideration of his affairs. David changed his clothing, presented himself in a manner fit to be seen by the multitude, and sat at the gates. When all the people heard of it, they ran together to him and greeted him. This was the present state of David's affairs. After Absalom had been defeated, the Hebrews who had supported him and escaped from the battle all returned to their homes. Then they sent messengers through every city, reminding the people of the many benefits David had given them, and especially of the freedom he had secured for them by rescuing them from many great wars. They complained that they themselves had driven David out of his kingdom and given it to another ruler, and that this other ruler, whom they had set over themselves, was now dead. Yet they still had not asked David to lay aside his anger against them, become reconciled with them, resume his usual care for their affairs, and take back the kingdom. These reports came to David again and again. Even so, David sent word to Zadok and Abiathar the high priests, telling them to speak to the rulers of the tribe of Judah. They were to say that it would bring shame on Judah if the other tribes chose David as king before they did, especially since Judah was related to him and shared his blood. David also ordered them to speak in the same way to Amasa, the commander of Judah's forces. Since Amasa was David's sister's son, David said he should not have failed to persuade the people to restore the kingdom to him. David added that Amasa could expect not only reconciliation, which was already granted, but also the supreme command of the army, the very command Absalom had given him. So the high priest spoke with the rulers of the tribe and delivered the king's message. They also persuaded Amasa to take charge of David's interests. Amasa then persuaded the tribe of Judah to send ambassadors at once to David, asking him to return to his own kingdom. The Israelites did the same, under the same persuasion from Amasa. When the ambassadors came to David, he set out for Jerusalem. The tribe of Judah was the first to come and meet the king at the river Jordan. Shimei the son of Gera also came, bringing with him 1,000 men from the tribe of Benjamin. Ziba, Saul's freedman, came as well, with his 15 sons and his 20 servants. These men, together with the tribe of Judah, laid a bridge of boats across the river so that the king and everyone with him could cross easily. As soon as David came to Jordan, the tribe of Judah greeted him. Shimei came onto the bridge, took hold of David's feet, and begged him to forgive the offense he had committed. He asked David not to be severe with him, and not to make him the first example of punishment under his restored authority. He urged the king to remember that he had repented of his failure in duty, and had taken care to come to him before anyone else. While Shimei was pleading with the king and trying to move him to compassion, Abishai, Joab's brother, objected. Should this man not die for this, since he cursed the king whom God appointed to reign over us? Will you never stop, you sons of Zeruiah? Please do not raise new troubles and seditions among us now that the former troubles are over. I want you to understand that today I begin my reign again, and therefore I swear to remit the punishments of all offenders and not to punish anyone who has sinned. So, Shimei, take courage, and do not fear being put to death. After this, Shimei bowed down before David and went on ahead of him. Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, also came to meet David. He was dressed in dirty clothing, and his hair was long and neglected, for after David had fled, Mephibosheth had been so overcome with grief that he had neither cut his hair nor washed his clothes. He had resolved to bear such hardships because of the change in the king's affairs. Ziba, his steward, had also falsely accused him to the king. When Mephibosheth greeted David and bowed before him, the king asked why he had not gone out of Jerusalem with him and accompanied him during his flight. Mephibosheth answered that this injustice was Ziba's fault. He said that when Ziba had been ordered to prepare what was needed for Mephibosheth to go with David, he had neglected it completely and treated him as if he were no more than a slave. Indeed, if my feet had been sound and strong, I would not have deserted you, for then I could have used them to flee with you. But that is not the only injury Ziba has done to my duty toward you, my lord and master. He has also slandered me and invented lies about me. Yet I know your mind will not accept such accusations, because you are righteous and love the truth, which God also wills to prevail. When you were in the greatest danger from my grandfather, and when our whole family might justly have been destroyed for that reason, you were moderate and merciful. You especially forgot those injuries at the very time when, if you had remembered them, you had the power to punish us for them. But instead you judged me to be your friend, set me every day at your own table, and let me lack nothing that one of your own most honored kinsmen could have expected. When Mephibosheth had spoken, David decided neither to punish him nor to condemn Ziba for having lied about his master. Instead, David told Mephibosheth that, since he had previously given all his estate to Ziba because Mephibosheth had not gone with him, he would now forgive him, and order that half the estate be restored to him. Mephibosheth answered that Ziba might take it all. It was enough for him that David had recovered his kingdom. David then urged Barzillai the Gileadite, a great and good man who had generously provided for him at Mahanaim, and had escorted him as far as Jordan, to come with him to Jerusalem. David promised to honor him in his old age, care for him, and provide for him in every way. But Barzillai strongly desired to live at home. He begged David to excuse him from attending the court, saying that he was too old to enjoy its pleasures. He was 80 years old, and was already preparing for death and burial. He asked the king to grant him this request and dismiss him, because his age had taken away his enjoyment of food and drink, and his ears were too dull to hear the sound of pipes or the music of other instruments, the kinds of delights enjoyed by those who live with kings. I dismiss you, but grant me your son Chimham, and I will bestow every kind of good thing on him. So Barzillai left his son with David, bowed down before the king, and wished him a successful conclusion to all his affairs according to his own desire. Then Barzillai returned home. David continued on to Gilgal, with about half the people of Israel around him and the whole tribe of Judah. Then the leading men of the country came to David at Gilgal with a large crowd, and they complained against the tribe of Judah. They said Judah had come to meet him privately, when all the tribes ought to have met him together, with one common purpose. But the rulers of Judah asked them not to be angry because Judah had arrived first. We are David's kinsmen, and for that reason we took special care for him, loved him, and came first to meet him. Yet we received no gifts from him because we came early, so those who came later have no reason to be uneasy. Brothers, we cannot help wondering at you when you call the king your kinsman alone. He has received from God authority over all of us together, and therefore he ought to be considered a kinsman to all of us. For this reason the whole people have 11 parts in him, while you have only 1 part. We are also older than you. So you have not acted justly in coming to the king in this private and hidden way. While these rulers were arguing with one another, a certain wicked man, who delighted in stirring up rebellion, stood up among the crowd. His name was Shimei, the son of Bichri from the tribe of Benjamin. He cried out loudly to the people and said that they had no share in David and no inheritance in the son of Jesse. After saying this, he blew a trumpet and declared war against the king. Then all the tribes left David and followed Shimei, while the tribe of Judah alone remained with him and brought him back to his royal palace at Jerusalem. As for David's concubines, with whom his son Absalom had lain, David removed them to another house. He ordered those responsible for them to provide for them generously, but he never went near them again. David also appointed Amasa captain of his forces and gave him the same high office that Joab had held before. He commanded Amasa to gather as large an army as he could from the tribe of Judah and return to him within 3 days, so that David might put his whole army under Amasa and send him to fight Shimei the son of Bichri. But while Amasa was away, he took too long gathering the army, and had not returned by the 3rd day. Then David spoke to Joab. We must not delay in this matter of Shimei, or he may gather a large army around him and cause more harm to our cause than Absalom himself did. Do not wait any longer. Take whatever forces you have ready, along with that old body of 600 men, and take your brother Abishai with you. Pursue our enemy and try to fight him wherever you can overtake him. Hurry to stop him before he seizes fortified cities and forces us to go through great labor and hardship to take him. Joab decided not to delay. He took his brother, the 600 men, and ordered the rest of the army at Jerusalem to follow him. Then he marched quickly against Shimei. When Joab reached Jibon, a village 40 furlongs from Jerusalem, Amasa came with a large army and met him. Joab was wearing his breastplate and had a sword fastened at his side. When Amasa came near to greet him, Joab carefully let his sword fall out, as if it had slipped by itself. He picked it up from the ground and came toward Amasa as though he meant to kiss him. With his other hand he took hold of Amasa's beard, and while Amasa suspected nothing, Joab struck him in the belly and killed him. Joab committed this impious and utterly profane act against a good young man, his own kinsman, who had done him no wrong. He did it from jealousy, because Amasa was about to receive the chief command of the army and hold equal honor with Joab before the king. This was the same reason Joab had killed Abner. In that earlier wicked deed, the death of his brother Asahel had given him a plausible excuse and made the crime seem pardonable. But in the murder of Amasa, there was no such covering for what he had done. After Joab killed this general, he pursued Shimei. He left a man beside the corpse and ordered him to cry out to the army that Amasa had been justly killed and rightly punished. If you are for the king, follow Joab his general, and Abishai Joab's brother. But because the body lay in the road, all the people came running to it, and as crowds commonly do, stood for a long time staring at it. So the men guarding the body removed it from the road, carried it to a place far away from the path, laid it there, and covered it with his garment. After this all the people followed Joab. Joab pursued Shimei through all the country of Israel, until someone told him that Shimei was in a strong city called Abel-Beth-maachah. Joab went there, surrounded it with his army, threw up a siege bank around it, and ordered his soldiers to undermine the walls and pull them down. Because the people in the city would not admit him, he was very angry with them. Now there was a woman of humble standing in the city, but she was wise and intelligent. When she saw her native city brought to its last extremity, she went up on the wall, and, through the armed men, called for Joab. When he came near, she told him that God had appointed kings and generals of armies, so they might cut off the enemies of the Hebrews and bring universal peace among them, but that Joab was now trying to overthrow and depopulate a chief city of the Israelites, though it had committed no offense. Joab answered her, May God continue to be merciful to me. I am inclined to avoid killing anyone among the people, and still less would I destroy a city like this. If they will hand over Shimei, the son of Bichri, who has rebelled against the king, I will end the siege and withdraw the army from this place. As soon as the woman heard what Joab said, she asked him to pause the siege for a little while, promising that the head of his enemy would soon be thrown out to him. Then she went down to the citizens and asked whether they would be wicked enough to perish miserably, together with their wives and children, for the sake of a worthless man whose background no one even knew. She asked whether they would have him as their king instead of David, who had been so great a benefactor to them, and whether they would set their city alone against such a mighty and powerful army. She persuaded them, and they cut off Shimei's head and threw it out to Joab's army. When this was done, the king's generals sounded a retreat and lifted the siege. When Joab came back to Jerusalem, he was again appointed general over all the people. The king also made Benaiah captain of the guards, and of the 600 men. He put Adoram over the tribute, and Sabbath and Achillos over the records. He made Sheva the scribe, and appointed Zadok and Abiathar as the high priests.
And there we will pause, with Absalom dead, the rebellion broken, and David coaxed back to his throne, reconciled, restored, but older, sadder, and still bleeding from the wound of that grief. The kingdom holds, but the bright morning of part 1 is long gone. Next time, in part 4, the close of book 7, the last troubles and the last acts of David, a fresh revolt and a famine, a census that brings a plague and an angel over Jerusalem, and then the old king's great labor of love, the gathering of the treasure and the plans for the temple he himself was not permitted to build, and his final charge to his son Solomon. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.